Mongols. You are not just recalling a chapter from a dusty history book. You are facing a story, unlike any other in history. A story carved not from stone, but from ice and fire and the relentless winds of the steppe. They were warriors, born and hardened on harsh, merciless plains. A land with no boundaries where the sky met the earth in an unbroken line. A land that gave no quarter and asked for none. And from this crucible of survival, they turned in just a few short, breathtaking years into a storm. A living, breathing tempest that swept across half the known world and changed it forever. Armies trained in brutal endurance, men who lived on horseback, who could sleep in the saddle, who drank mare's milk and their own horse's blood for sustenance. They fought in scorching, sun-blistered deserts as fiercely as they fought among the frozen, silent snows. They were a force of nature, given human form. And worst of all, they often left behind them nothing. Nothing but the blackened skeletons of burned cities, the chilling silence of emptied plains, and the haunted, whispered stories of the few survivors who lived to recount what they had seen. Stories still told with undimmed terror to this very day. So hit the subscribe and like buttons, otherwise we might just have to send Genghis Khan himself to knock on your door. And you already know, his knocks were never friendly. In the vast, endless plains of Mongolia, where the wind never stops its ancient song, where the grass ripples like a great green sea, and herds of horses, strong and wild, fill the horizon to the very edge of sight, a boy was born. His name was Temujin. His life did not begin in comfort, nor in the luxury of a warm, permanent home. It began amid the raw, unforgiving cruelty of nature and the endless wars of feuding tribes. The world into which he opened his eyes was a world painted in stark, primal colors, the blue of a merciless sky, the brown of the hard earth, and the red of spilled blood. From his earliest days, he knew in his very bones that survival was not a gift freely given. It had to be taken, seized by force and by will. He lived his childhood caught in the grip of hunger and the cold shadow of fear. The Mongol tribes were accustomed to raids, betrayal. It was the rhythm of their existence. No one trusted anyone. Blood ties were frayed by ambition. Every alliance, every handshake was as fragile as thin ice on a winter stream. In that brutal world, the young Temujin realized that survival depended not only on strength of arm, but on cunning of mind. On the sharp, calculating intelligence that could see 3 moves ahead, and most importantly, on the mysterious ability to win and to keep a man's loyalty. From childhood, he learned the hard way that words could be sharper than swords, and that a promise, wisely given, could be worth more than an army. Hardship was his relentless teacher. It shaped him, bent him, and then hardened him. Hunger, that unwelcome guest that knocked on his door again and again, taught him patience, a patience as deep and cold as a mountain lake. Betrayal carved into his young soul a hardness, a core of flint that would never, ever waver. And then, the defining blow, when his father was poisoned, stolen from him while he was still just a boy. He did not break. He stood there small and alone against the vast steppe and turned his pain, his grief, into fire. A cold, smouldering fire of resolve. He looked out at the fractured tribes around him, a chaotic mosaic of hatred and pride, and in his mind a question began to form. How could he turn that chaos, that wild, untamed energy, into a single, unified, unstoppable power? A power the world could not resist. Over the years, the boy Temujin became the leader of a small, hardened band of loyal men. They were few, a mere handful against the world, but their obedience to him was absolute. They looked into his eyes, and they knew. He was different. His vision went beyond revenge, beyond plunder. He spoke of uniting all Mongols as if it were destiny written in the stars, of building an empire that would rise from the dust of the steppes to terrify and reshape the world. This harsh beginning did not weaken him. It was the anvil upon which Genghis Khan was forged, the man who would turn pain into empire. And so, with the wind at his back and fire in his heart, the story truly begins. When Temujin grew older and became a commander in his own right, he displayed a patience as terrifying as his charge. He didn't rush to invade glittering cities. He started from within, from the heart of the steppe itself. The Mongols were scattered, fractured, a constellation of tribes living for raids and loot. No written laws, no lasting loyalty. And here lay his genius. His first step was not to conquer, but to build. He built loyalty on a new revolutionary foundation. Instead of old tribal bloodlines, he proposed a radical idea: personal loyalty. Not to a clan, but to him. A man was not judged by his lineage, but by his courage and his obedience. With this single shift, he shattered the ancient kinship system that had divided the Mongols for centuries. He opened the door for rival clans to join a single unified cause. He was a meritocrat in an age of bloodlines. He shared the spoils with care. Every warrior, from archer to captain, received his fair share. Victory was for all, not just the chiefs. And this created discipline, cohesion, unity. He restructured the army, units of 10, then hundreds, then thousands. Each man bound to his brothers, each knowing his place, each ready to die for the one beside him. The army moved like lightning. It was no mob of raiders, but a precise, living machine. And Genghis Khan wielded a new weapon: fear. He used it like strategy. When a tribe defied him, he struck once brutally, leaving behind ruins so complete that 10 others surrendered without a fight. Those who joined were rewarded. Those who resisted, erased. He ruled by terror and by promise. And with every tribe that bowed, his grand design grew. The steppes turned from a wasteland of petty raids into a single humming army. A coiled spring ready to uncoil and storm the world. This was the birth of Genghis Khan. Not by chance, but by vision. Cold, clear, unshakable vision. Uniting the Mongols was only the first step on a road that would lead to conquering half the world. Once the tribes were united, the horizon itself no longer seemed enough to contain his ambition. Genghis Khan turned his gaze outward to the glittering cities beyond the steppes, to empires that had long looked down upon the Mongols as savages, barely human. The first to feel his storm was the kingdom of Xixia, a land of walled fortresses and desert cities, protected by tradition and arrogance. They had no idea what was coming. The Mongols came like a phantom wind, fast, silent, relentless. They attacked not just armies, but systems. They destroyed water supplies, burned crops, cut lines of retreat. Cities that had stood for centuries fell in days. Then came the Jin dynasty, China's mighty northern empire, a force thought unassailable. Armies in the hundreds of thousands, cities with walls so thick 1,000 horses could gallop side by side atop them. And yet, Genghis saw their weakness, not in their stone, but in their pride. He didn't charge blindly. He studied, waited, adapted. His scouts, the eyes of the Mongol horde, rode like shadows for weeks before every strike. And when the time came, he unleashed an illusion of chaos that was, in truth, perfect order. He made his enemies believe they were winning, right until the moment the trap closed. The Jin fell, one stronghold at a time. And when they realized the scope of the disaster, it was already too late. Genghis Khan had done the impossible. He had brought the greatest army of the age to its knees with horsemen, born in tents, armed with bows and silence. But the Khan's hunger did not stop. It could not. He turned his gaze westward toward Central Asia and beyond, toward the Silk Road and the shining cities that lined its endless arteries. Bukhara, Samarkand, names that once meant splendor and civilization. When the Shah of Khwarezm insulted him, killing his envoys and merchants, Genghis responded, not with diplomacy, but with annihilation. He unleashed his armies like divine punishment. The Khwarezm Empire ceased to exist, and in the ashes of their cities, he left a message, written not in ink, but in ruin. To break a treaty with the Mongols was to sign your own extinction. His armies rolled on across Persia, across the Caucasus, across the plains where Europe began to tremble. Kings and emperors who had never heard the word Mongol began to whisper it in fear. What made his conquest unstoppable was not merely ferocity, it was intelligence. He turned information into a weapon. His spies moved faster than his horses. His generals were chosen not by blood, but by brilliance. His tactics evolved with every campaign, shifting, adapting, learning. Feigned retreats, encirclements, ambushes hidden within ambushes. His armies were ghosts, appearing where least expected, vanishing before a counterstrike could form. His enemies faced not a man, but a force that learned and never forgot. And behind every burning city, behind every crushed army, was still that same boy from the steppe. The one who had starved and survived. The one who had sworn never again to be at the mercy of others. He kept that promise, not just for himself, but for an entire people. In his later years, when the empire stretched farther than thought could follow, when his banners flew from the Pacific to the Caspian, Genghis Khan still returned often, to the steppes, to the open sky, to the whispering grass, to the wind that had raised him. He would sit in silence, listening to the eternal hum of the plains. Perhaps he knew that empires fade, that stone crumbles, that even the loudest names are eventually swallowed by time. But the Mongols, his Mongols, had changed the very shape of the world. They built roads that carried not just armies, but ideas. They connected civilizations that had never before touched. And they proved that from the humblest soil can rise a power that remakes the earth. When he finally died, the place of his grave hidden forever, it was said that thousands of riders trampled the ground where he was buried, until no trace remained, as if the land itself wished to keep its secret. And so, Genghis Khan vanished into the very earth that had created him. But his echo never faded. To this day you can stand upon the steppes of Mongolia, feel the cold wind brush your face, and if you listen closely, very closely, you might still hear it, the distant thunder of hooves racing through time. The echo of a name that once shook the world.